May 10th, 1996. The summit of Mount Everest, the rooftop of the world. A group of climbers, exhausted but euphoric, stand at 29,029 feet. They have achieved their lifelong dream. But as they begin their descent, a whiteout engulfs the mountain. Temperatures plunge to -40 degrees Celsius. Oxygen tanks run dry. One by one, climbers stumble, collapse, and never rise again. By midnight, 8 people will be dead, making this the deadliest single day in Everest history. How did a perfect day turn into a catastrophe? This is the story of hubris, heroism, and the unforgiving mountain that claimed its victims not with a single avalanche, but with a slow, agonizing chain of errors. The world would watch in horror as the bodies were left frozen in the death zone, a grim testament to the price of ambition. To understand the disaster, we must first understand the players. In 1996, Everest had become a commercial enterprise. 2 major expeditions dominated the scene. Adventure Consultants, led by the charismatic New Zealander Rob Hall, and Mountain Madness, led by the rugged American Scott Fisher. Both were seasoned guides, each charging clients upwards of $65,000 for a chance at the summit. Their clients were a mix of experienced climbers and wealthy amateurs. John Krakauer, a journalist, Beck Weathers, a pathologist, Doug Hansen, a postal worker on his second attempt, and Sandy Hill Pittman, a socialite. The mountain was crowded. Over 30 climbers from various expeditions would attempt the summit on the same day. The competition for summit slots, the pressure to succeed, and the lure of fame created a volatile mix. No one knew that the stage was set for tragedy. The climb began with optimism. In late March, the teams gathered at Everest Base Camp, a bustling tent city at 17,600 feet. The weather was favorable and spirits were high. The route through the treacherous Khumbu Icefall, a moving glacier of towering seracs and deep crevasses, was carefully fixed with ropes and ladders. Sherpas, the unsung heroes, carried loads of oxygen bottles, tents, and food up the mountain. By early May, the teams had established camps at the South Col, 26,000 feet, and the Balcony, 27,600 feet. The plan was simple. On May 10th, a select group would push for the summit with a strict turnaround time of 2 p.m. Any later, and they risked descending in darkness. But the mountain had its own plans. Delays in fixing ropes to the summit ridge would prove fatal. The clock was ticking, but no one noticed. The first warnings went unheeded. On May 9th, as climbers prepared for their summit push, a storm was brewing. Meteorologists had predicted deteriorating weather, but the forecast was ambiguous. Rob Hall, known for his meticulous planning, decided to proceed. Meanwhile, a bottleneck formed at the Hillary Step, a 40-foot rock wall just below the summit. Climbers from multiple expeditions converged, causing delays of over an hour. Experienced mountaineers like Anatoly Bukriv, a guide for Mountain Madness, grew concerned. He had descended early to assist clients, a decision that later drew criticism. But the most ominous sign was the lack of fixed ropes on the summit ridge. The Sherpas assigned to fix them had been delayed, forcing climbers to wait in the cold. Oxygen levels dropped, fingers and toes began to freeze. Yet the lure of the summit was irresistible. By midday on May 10th, the summit was within reach. Climbers moved slowly, each step a laborious effort in the thin air. The sky was clear, and the view from the top of the world was breathtaking, a panorama of Himalayan peaks stretching to the horizon. The sense of achievement was palpable. Rob Hall reached the summit with client Doug Hansen, who had failed the previous year. Scott Fisher arrived shortly after, exhausted but triumphant. But the delays had pushed them past the 2 p.m. turnaround. Hall, aware of the risk, radioed base camp that he was helping Hansen descend. Fisher, visibly struggling, told his team he was fine. The descent began, but the weather was already changing. Clouds rolled in, and the wind picked up. The beautiful day was turning ugly, and the climbers were scattered across the mountain, strung out and vulnerable. The crisis point came at the southeast ridge, just below the summit. As darkness fell, a fierce blizzard engulfed the mountain. Visibility dropped to zero. Climbers lost their way, stumbling blindly in the whiteout. Oxygen bottles were empty or malfunctioning. Rob Hall and Doug Hansen became separated from the others. Hall radioed base camp that Hansen was in trouble, unable to descend. He stayed with him, a decision that would cost both their lives. Scott Fisher, suffering from altitude sickness and exhaustion, collapsed near the balcony. His guide, Anatoly Bukreev, went back to search for him but could not find him in the storm. Beck Weathers, left for dead twice, somehow survived the night. The decision to ignore the turnaround time, to push for the summit despite the delays, had sealed their fate. The mountain was now a frozen graveyard. The catastrophe unfolded in slow motion. Throughout the night, Base Camp listened to Rob Hall's final radio transmissions. He was trapped at 28,700 feet, unable to move, his oxygen depleted. He spoke to his pregnant wife, Jan Arnold, who was in New Zealand. "I love you," he said. "Sleep well, my sweetheart. Please don't worry too much." Those were his last words. His body was found the next day, frozen in place. Scott Fisher's body was discovered near the balcony, his face covered in ice. Doug Hansen's body was never recovered. In total, 8 people died: Rob Hall, Scott Fisher, Doug Hansen, Andy Harris, and 3 members of the Indo-Tibetan Border Police expedition. The storm had claimed them one by one. The survivors, including John Krakauer and Beck Weathers, made it down with severe frostbite and trauma. The world was shocked by the scale of the tragedy. The peak of horror came on the morning of May 11th. As the storm cleared, survivors emerged from the chaos. Beck Weathers, who had been left for dead twice, miraculously walked into camp, his face and hands severely frostbitten. He had spent the night in the open at 27,000 feet, hallucinating and near death. Anatoly Bukreev, despite criticism for his early descent, single-handedly rescued 3 climbers, dragging them to safety. But the mountain was littered with bodies. The sight was surreal. Climbers frozen in the positions they had died, their gear scattered. The tragedy was not a sudden avalanche, but a slow, agonizing failure of decision-making and weather. The survivors would carry the guilt and trauma for the rest of their lives. The disaster became a cautionary tale about the commercialization of Everest and the hubris of those who dare to conquer it. The aftermath was a grim accounting of the dead and the living. The bodies of Hall, Fisher, and others were left on the mountain, too dangerous to retrieve. They remain there to this day, frozen in time. The survivors returned home to face intense media scrutiny and personal demons. John Krakauer wrote a best-selling book, Into Thin Air, which sparked controversy over the events and blame. Beck Weathers underwent multiple surgeries to save his hands and nose, but lost fingers and toes. The climbing community was divided. Some blamed the guides for poor decisions, others blamed the clients for their inexperience. The disaster prompted changes in Everest expeditions: stricter turnarounds, better communication, and a ban on solo climbs. But the allure of Everest remained. In the years since, hundreds have reached the summit, but the 1996 disaster is a stark reminder that the mountain does not forgive. The 1996 Everest disaster remains one of the most infamous tragedies in mountaineering history. It exposed the dangers of commercial expeditions, the pressure of summit fever, and the thin line between success and death. The lessons learned have saved lives, but the mountain continues to claim victims. Today, Everest is more crowded than ever, with hundreds of climbers attempting the summit each season. The 1996 disaster serves as a warning. No amount of money or planning can guarantee safety. The mountain is indifferent. As you watch the footage of that fateful day, remember the 8 who died, the survivors who endured, and the families left behind. If this story captivated you, subscribe to Doomed Expeditions for more tales of ambition, adventure, and tragedy. Like and share this video to keep their memory alive. Until next time, stay safe and respect the mountains.